their way in. So thank you everyone for joining the ASEAN-Australia Digital Trade Standard Initiative webinar today. My name is Kajun, and on behalf of Access Partnership, IMIT, and DFAT, a warm welcome. The topic of our webinar today is on e-invoicing in ASEAN, and it's around expanding MSMEs' adoption of e-invoicing in the region. So today we have put together a panel of experts that are well placed to share their insights on the topic. But before we dive into the session, just a few housekeeping rules to note. The session will be recorded and questions are encouraged. So please make sure to use the ask question function in the chat. Feel free to pop in chat at any point of the session. Your camera and microphone will be automatically turned off at the start. But if you want to make any verbal comment or ask question during the Q&A, please use the raise hand function and the moderator will call on you. To moderate our session today, we are grateful to have Lim Mei An, Director of FairTech Institute of Access Partnership and the Emeritus Director of Asia Cloud Computing Association. So without further ado, I'll hand over the time to Director Mei An to kickstart the session. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Kajun. Thank you very much. Before I start, I just want to recognize and give thanks to my ancestors and forefathers who have come before me for the session. Thank you very much for joining us in this particular discussion around e-invoicing in ASEAN. I'm really pleased to have Mr. Gyok and Mr. Stockwell, who will be speaking with us about e-invoicing in the first instance. I think it's one of those we were chatting just before the session, is one of those not quite sexy and yet really important components of the digital economy that we often want to talk about, or we often want in place, but don't quite know how to talk about. So I really want to thank all of you who are here. And I do see some friends in the audience, so really glad that you're joining us. And please say hi in the chat function. I will be taking questions, or we will be taking questions throughout the whole entire session. So I would like to encourage you to introduce yourself and also perhaps drop in your LinkedIn or your email if you want to connect with other people, because I think online sometimes it's quite hard to network, but I would like to encourage all of us to network. And of course, if you have questions, to please feel free to drop them into the chat. I will be monitoring and I will be looking into it. As a quick review of what has been going on, I'll just cover a couple of insights from the Digital Trade Standards Initiative. And I'm going to get, well, you can obviously take screenshots, but I think we will be distributing. Kajun, will we be distributing these slides after the session?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, so we can, so don't worry if you don't manage to get the screenshot, but let me just cover some e-invoicing insights from the Digital Trade Standards Initiative. And I'm going to invite Mr. Stockwell and Mr. Gyok. You can switch off your camera until we all come on again. All right. Really quickly, in terms of the e-invoicing market in ASEAN, next slide, please. Yeah, we have a pretty substantive trade market in ASEAN, because as you can see, the combined GDP is actually $3.3 trillion US, and there are quite a number of people here. At last count in 2021, mind you, during COVID-19, we didn't manage to count people. So I think that we actually do have a lot more people right now in 2023, and almost 600 and in excess of 650 million people, and we have about 1/5 of global foreign direct investment inflow annually, and this means a lot of cross-border trade is coming in, etc. There is a high growth of trade in ASEAN, and I think everybody is quite keen on increasing this. We have increased the trade by about 15% year on year to 1.8 trillion in just the first semester of 2022. And the cross-border corporate transactions, this is corporate and this is not consumer transactions, cross-border corporate transactions has increased to about 50 billion US, and we are really anticipating that this trade will grow in dollar value, not just in dollar value, but also in terms of transaction number. And what we see is that e-invoicing is going to be really important because obviously every single transaction involves an invoice. I don't think that I need to tell you about the next slide, which is really about the benefits of e-invoicing. There are 3 that we can promote, which is reduced financial costs, operational efficiency, and environmental sustainability. A lot of times the financial cost, people think that because you want to do e-invoicing, oh, there's a switching cost involved. It's expensive, it's hard, it's tiring, it's cumbersome, and you got to do the people change and you got to train people again to do e-invoicing. Well, ultimately, when you do the switching over to e-invoicing, we actually feel that you can do a lot more value-added analysis. You can actually see more about, get more insights on your company's spend, so there's more visibility, and you can actually do a lot more predictive stuff. And I didn't want to bring up generative AI and just use that term just nonsensically here, but the idea of doing further data analysis on the information that can be gathered from doing e-invoicing, I think it's going to be really, really strong and will continue to be strong in the future. Operational efficiency and environmental sustainability are the other 2. I'll just give you an example of how I was chatting with some people about the shipping bills, the bills of lading. The average container, the average consignment, actually you have to have about 50 sheets of paper per consignment. That's sheets of paper. Can you imagine how much environmental sustainability, how much environmental harm is being done by those pieces of paper and stamps that we'll have to do? But right now, with e-invoicing and digital approaches, we will be able to be a little bit more environmental sustainable in that practice. The importance of e-invoicing for MSMEs is on the next slide, and there are 4. For us, we feel that the first is you will get actually faster time, less errors, so you get faster payments and you get improved cash flows for MSMEs, which is really, really important, because I know that a lot of MSMEs are often do rely on cash in and cash out, so that delta between the cash in and cash out is really, really tight. So that's actually really important for MSMEs to keep track of. The invoicing can also be used as collaterals by suppliers to enhance their working capital. A lot of times you do need to prove, for example, that you are an active and viable MSME. So that's always really important to demonstrate. So that gives you a corpus of proof points that you can provide, for example, to banks and other alternative lending agencies, for example. The third on the bottom left, you can see that we actually will be able to detect data anomalies and fraud with automated processing tools, which is always important, because I think that cybercrime is definitely on the rise. And as an MSME, you might still be fairly vulnerable to some of these fraud processes. And finally, cross-border trade becomes easier and more convenient because suppliers and buyers are digitally connected on a central platform network. We won't, I think, be chatting too much about the pros and cons of having too much of a platform, because that's a competition challenge. But I think that what we're focused right now on is the idea of cross-border trade becoming easier and easier for across ASEAN and our trading partners. The next slide shows you a bit of a snapshot of some of the research that we have done for an overview of the e-invoicing landscape. So Singapore, Vietnam, Indonesia, Thailand, and the Philippines. I really should have put the names of the countries underneath the flags, because now I'm actually having to recognize the flags as I name them out. These are countries with a national e-invoicing system and standard, and Malaysia and Cambodia both have plans to implement the national e-invoicing system and framework, and Brunei, Myanmar, and Laos have no national invoicing system, I'd say, yet, because I think that there is a very strong impetus to want to do it. So I think we are very happy to be open and to discussing with any of the countries and any of you who are working in any of these countries to think about how to be implementing an e-invoicing approach. What are some of the challenges that we found in our research? The challenges in the next slide are that there is actually a high cost involved. Next slide, please. High upfront adoption cost is one of them, which I've already mentioned already. The second is information gaps. You may not know that this is actually pretty important and can actually benefit your business. And the third is technical capacity gaps. You want to do it, but you're not sure who to help you do it. You're not sure how to get it done. And the fourth is a little bit more on the government side, there's actually some difficulty in complying with e-invoicing regulations across the region because we all have subtle differences in requirements. It could be, for example, as simple as just reporting on currencies or something or other. So this is something which I think Mr. Stockwell and Mr. Gyok will be speaking a little bit about in terms of the challenges. Now, in terms of the roles of standards in closing the gap, which is the next slide, we think that the use of international standards will help to articulate some common requirements. So to make it easier for everybody to understand how we can be working together to advance the e-invoicing standard. It's a little bit like how when you go to another country, oh, how I wish it would be easy for me just to plug in my phone charger and charge the phone. Now with USB charging, I think it's gotten a little bit easier, but the power plugs are still not quite standard across the world. We have started to close the gap in some instances, but I think that we're not quite there yet. The role in standards in closing this gap for e-invoicing is really important because if we have a good standard, which we do now, it does allow different e-invoicing systems to be able to talk to each other. So it becomes interoperable and that network becomes easier and the transaction cost therefore becomes cheaper. The second is actually really important, this idea of building trust in e-invoicing systems, because if you believe that this e-invoicing system is a good one, a lot more people will use it. Once you have that network effects come in, then there will be a lot more guidelines around safety, a lot more guidelines around reliability, a lot more eyes will be on it. And I think that we will be able to ensure that the e-invoicing systems will be adhering to specifications if there is an international standard involved. The third role of standards in closing the gap is that it allows us to capture the potential and accelerate the growth of trade in ASEAN. So we can actually enhance the value and volume of invoices which demonstrate trade in the region. The final slide that I have before I turn it over to Mr. Stockwell and Mr. Gyok is some recommendations that we have to put forward for you. And again, I would really encourage you guys to comment on these if they're sensible, if they're not sensible, or if you have any comments. The first is to please engage and continue to engage in discussions in aligning e-invoicing standards. I think that there are different standards around. We do want to align them properly. Please give your ideas and give your thoughts, especially if you have actually tested them. And this is a question that I have for all of you who are in the audience right now. If you've tested them, I'd really love to hear your thoughts on certain systems that you've tested or certain types of standards which you've tested. The second is that we think that there may be a need to provide financial incentives and support to MSMEs, for example, either tax reliefs or payment or subsidized upfront costs of training. We think that also it's really important to be conducting capacity building workshops for MSMEs on planning and implementing e-invoicing projects in their companies. And this is where perhaps public-private partnerships might be useful in paving the way for a better e-invoicing ecosystem. And the fourth is to support and build industry networks where companies can come together to share some of your know-how and some of the work that you have already done. So with that, thank you very much for your attention. I am going to pause here to see if anyone has any questions before I get our panelists to start their presentations. Any questions in the first instance? No? Then I'm going to get Mr. Gyok and Mr. Stockwell to switch on the cameras in the first instance. Mr. Stockwell is the Director of e-invoicing from the Australian Taxation Office, Australia, and Mr. Gyok Seong-Wah is the Director for the e-invoicing project office at the IMDA in Singapore. Welcome to both of you. Thank you very much for joining us. We'll be moving towards two panelist presentations first, but perhaps I do have some time. Would you like to respond to anything that we've shared, or say a couple of words of welcome to our guests?
Firstly, thank you for the invitation to speak today. I'm really pleased to support the ASEAN community. It's a very exciting topic, even though you mightn't think it's sexy. I think it's got a lot of potential and has a lot of opportunity to actually help our region particularly. I was very interested in one of your slides, I think it's slide 3 of yours, or the second last slide, where you spoke about some of the challenges. And I think different countries have different dynamics, and I'll talk about particularly about cost and how what we're seeing here in Australia.
Thank you. Mr. Gyok, you are on mute. Are you on mute? We can't hear you.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, I was saying that it's always good to have a session like this. And in fact, I noticed that a number of the participants have also in the past have attended some of our annual sessions of sharing. So hope this is not too much of a repeat, but there's always new development that can be shared. And one thing I noted from Lynn's comment was that e-invoicing is not quite a sexy thing. So an agency that drives a lot of digitalization, talking about AI, 5G and all that, this is one of the most low-tech things that we are doing. So yeah, but it is a real mean problem that we are trying to solve. Yeah, so it's always good to hear from everybody what's their experience, and we can share it across. Yeah.
I think that it's not sexy, but maybe I should put one of the recommendations is like find a way to make e-invoicing sexier for everybody. All right, but without further ado, I'm gonna get Mr. Stockwell perhaps to because I do know that you have prepared some insights and some slides for us. So I'm going to turn the time over to you. So please do take it away.
Thanks very much, and good afternoon, everyone. And as Songwei said, it's good to see some familiar faces. I'm hoping you're gaining some further insight if you've heard part of the presentation you'll see today. Firstly, I want to talk about, before I get into the exact topic of how we're supporting micro and small to medium enterprises, I think it's important to understand the context of where we are in our region here, because when you look at the business community, they're all different. They have different needs, different requirements, different capability. No different are the countries that exist here in ASEAN, but also globally in terms of we have different dynamics, different social policies, business environments. Our tax compliance levels may be different. Our political environment's different. And the government has different priorities in each of our countries. So that all plays into a very difficult role we play as administrators in terms of delivering e-invoicing to our relative countries, as well as across the region. So I just want to take that, think about that context and how you as an influencer maybe of those administrations, or where a government has got choice in terms of what e-invoicing is. And you'll hear from myself, but also I know Songwei is going to talk about later on some of the choices you have in terms of e-invoicing. It's just not, whilst it is a standard, it's got a lot of flexibility and a lot of different components to it that can be fit for purpose for your country. What I'm talking about here is in Australia, we decided to use e-invoicing to boost the productivity in our economy. So that's where we saw there was an opportunity to actually have e-invoicing come in. And I think Lynn was mentioning before about the efficiency that e-invoicing provides. So that's certainly one of the major drivers behind why we brought in e-invoicing into Australia. We know we've had in the past globally efficiencies like EDI portals or scanning tools. Now these sort of initiatives, yes, were step changes for invoicing and procurement. However, they were largely designed and driven by the large enterprise entities in our countries, and they got a lot of the benefits from it. Whereas the SMEs or the micro end of the community didn't see so much of that benefit, and hence they've reached out to us a few years ago and saying, well, how can I have a better say in how I deal with my my large customers in particular who dictate to me how I should be doing. And obviously invoicing gives them the power back by using their own software to interact with their large customers. Lim also called out about slow payments, and that's no different in our country. Often we're seeing payments over 30 days, and it's something we need to overcome to get faster payments, particularly to our small and micro clients, so customers, so that they're much more better with their cash flow and being a more resilient and powerful business. Another factor I touched on is about tax compliance rate. So a question I get asked often in Australia as to why did Australia not decide to use this from a tax compliance perspective? The reason behind that is that we've got a relatively strong tax compliance rate for our indirect tax here. And we've got also fairly sophisticated tax regime which maintains that level of compliance. And so we didn't see the need for us to increase that level of reporting or burden upon our business community to actually change that current position. So that's the reason behind that. But I know many countries around the world are particularly looking to improve their tax compliance rate through the use of e-invoicing, and have done. There's plenty of positive use cases on that. The other factor I'd call about our countries is about digitalisation. That doesn't always roll off the tongue, but how as government we want to see more and more digital or online services supporting our community. And to do that, though, we need a community that has got the digital tools to actually interact with us and make us as more efficient as well as themselves. So that's another, I think, strong byproduct of e-invoicing, is just one of those components of the overall digital tools that our business will use. So I can just go to the next slide. Sorry, the next one. I was talking about that slide then. Sorry, beg your pardon. Should have rolled for earlier. If we can go to the next slide about what is e-invoicing. And Lim mentioned, at a high level, what is e-invoicing? For me, it's just that digital exchange of the data between two parties, the supplier and the buyer, using their own software. It's simple as that, and using the power of the standard to actually make that happen. That's really where the magic happens. We'll talk about some of the benefits and some of the barriers shortly. But one of the things that we're really struggling in Australia, and we know in different parts of the world are also, is trying to change the understanding of what e-invoicing is about. And for us, it's definitely not email and PDF, and that's still a perception that we're still trying to overcome. And I know different parts of the world struggle still with that. How I try to explain that to people, if you haven't heard this analogy before, is that I liken it to the maybe using a mobile phone and texting between two parties. So I've got a phone in my pocket, so does my colleague. They're different phones, but I connect to the mobile network through my provider, and so does my colleague through their own provider. They're different providers. So, but today, every day, I do many texts seamlessly without even thinking that that data will land in someone else's phone, and they'll be able to get the data and read the message. And that's an everyday case. And e-invoicing will be no different from that. Using my own software to send data to my colleague or business trading partner in their software, seamless as that, through a safe and secure network. And I've got confidence that that data is going to be received and processed as designed. So that's the analogy I often use to try and break down the misconception, what it's about. But still, it is a very difficult challenge we have. One other factor I'd call out while I'm talking about that is how do I know that the it'll land with the business partner that I want to? And of course, we use an identifier in the PEPL framework. So if you're texting, obviously you use the mobile phone number of your colleague. Whereas in this case, we would use an identifier. In Australia, we use the Australian business number, but in different countries, you'll use your own business identifier to ensure that the invoice goes to the right recipient. On the next slide, just a little bit more on the PEPL what we call the four corner model. I know Songwar is going to go into a little bit more detail on some of the other models that have been developed over the last few years, but this is the base model that we work from when we're talking about e-invoicing and how we transmit from many people to many recipients. I gave the analogy of the mobile phone network, but you can use the same analogy for the banking system where I want to pay someone using a different bank than what I do. Today, the money flows digitally through our online account to their online account. Again, it's a very safe, secure way of doing business, and e-invoicing again replicates that same sort of process. Now, the four-corner model, obviously, in the diagram here, supports an invoice flowing from corner 1 through our access point to our business recipient's access point at 3 and onto them at 4. But likewise, you do the same in purchase orders that might be sent by my customer to me, so 4 through to 1. We're using the same processes and same model to ensure and standardize the process that people would expect to see. So Songhua will expand upon this and other models on that. Let's go to the next slide. Lim covered a lot of the benefits, so I'm not going to go into a lot more detail other than to say this is what we mainly focus upon when we're advising our business clients about e-invoicing. The first one, obviously, the savings. And there's two strong stats I use for savings. One is about it's about 3-to-1 return. Again, this is an Australian market. We have different cost factors and different labour costs than your own country, but you'd be able to do your own modelling. But we work on about a 3-to-1 ratio, more efficient using the e-invoicing. And secondly, what that amounts to for an average small business is about 10 to 11 days of time back in their business. So that's a fairly strong dividend for the average business. Obviously, a very small business with not many invoices, obviously the return on investment is much lower. But if you've got a high volume invoice, you're obviously going to be saving a lot more. And obviously you can reinvest that time, or if you're paying for that money back into the business. The other factor on reliable and secure is something I really emphasise in the Australian market more recently as a result of a lot of the cybersecurity and email fraud that's been perpetrated. Each country, again, sees this differently, but we've had a couple of large public cybersecurity incidents in the last couple of years, which has impacted millions of Australians. And so what we're trying to do here through e-invoicing is protect those businesses and make them more resilient by removing emails wherever possible from their daily business. And particularly where we've seen email fraud scams, where they've intercepted the email and changed the banking details so that unfortunately the customer pays to the wrong account. The statistics are fairly damning in this case. We see about 60% of all these cases being impacted is upon the small business. And the other telling statistic we see is only about 5% of the monies are ever recovered. And that can be very catastrophic to many small businesses who have small margins. And when a large invoice is intercepted, it can be a very difficult time to manage that. The other factor I'd just call out there, the network being 24/7, so it's always on, reliable, secure, it's encrypted through the network, but also those access points, those new technologies providers there, they're accredited by the PEPL authorities to ensure that they've got the right safeguards and the right security qualifications, that they're supporting you as a business, the SME as the business, and giving them confidence their data is secure. The last point I'll just touch on, I suppose, is around how it balances the addresses a market imbalance. Where I mentioned before about EDI and large business, and what I call locking people into a paper paradigm where they're asked to provide data the same way as what the large client needs, as opposed to how their software or their process, their system operates today. And it means I have to have multiple ways of dealing with multiple customers, and that is a very heavy overhead or burden upon a small business having to do business that way. Whereas e-invoicing puts them on an equal playing field, and so they can use their own software using this standard to actually then communicate and send the information through to the business. Next slide, I'll just touch on very quickly is just a bit about the standard itself. So international standard we refer to as PEPL. You might have heard about this already. Currently over 40 countries, being proven over 12 years. PEPL had its formal 10th birthday last year, but it's got a very strong grounding. And one of the reasons behind us selecting PEPL is around its very strong governance framework. So it's and also a collaborative membership, so that the change process and the way it operates is a very comforting and gives us strength in terms of a solid international standard. The other key stats on that page, 500 members. So this doesn't just include access points, but it gives you an idea of how many members service providers are supporting all the businesses around the globe, with hundreds of millions of businesses now joined in through that global network. The next slide just gives you a map of the globe. I haven't called out our region here, but it gives you different colours, gives you different layers or insights into where PEPL is strong. Obviously, here in Singapore and Australia, New Zealand, Japan, in our region, we've got that Pacific area covered. We're seeing also an emergence of another region in the Middle East, with about 5 or 6 countries there in very early but different stages of implementation, and they also will become another cluster. The strong dominant cluster obviously is in Europe, where this started from, with a lot of countries in the European Union having adopted different parts of PEPL. Why North America is coloured there is largely because they have supply chains with Europe. And so this represents they've, whilst maybe not have a formal position yet in US on PEPL or e-invoicing, they're in pilot stage, but they do have a lot of customers or trading partners in that part of the world dealing and using the PEPL standard to enable trade to occur. Let's just go to the next slide. A little bit about the Australian journey. I won't go through it all, but really our journey started back in about 2019 when we joined up with New Zealand with an arrangement to put e-invoicing in to help our strong trading relationship we have with New Zealand. And then, if you look through the normal process you'd expect to see with a country coming on board, we got legislation in 2019, formed our PEPL authority. From that, we then started putting the specification in the market and onboarding our access points. And what this really formed by early 2020 was the foundation that you need to actually then start raising awareness and getting people to start trading on that network. So that's essentially, over the last couple of years, we've been focused upon raising awareness and ensuring that people can use the system as best they can. The difficulty, of course, is a couple of years ago we've had COVID, and that did put a bit of dampener and slowed up our original targets that we had for adoption, but we're now starting to see growth. If we go to the next slide, which is our adoption, a bit more about adoption journey. Very short slide. Again, these slides will be available, so you don't have to madly write down the small print there. But what I'm trying to demonstrate there, that we created that foundation with our enablers in the early stages. We're now onboarding the federal government and large businesses into the entity to actually demonstrate leadership, but also give confidence to small and medium enterprises that e-invoicing is here in Australia and able to confidently trade with them. If I go to the next slide, this just represents the key stakeholder groups we had and identified, and why it's important to segment those areas in your country to have tailored information or tailored messaging or relationships to aid you. On the right-hand side, we have our digital service providers and intermediaries. We use them to leverage the relationships they have with business in Australia. So obviously with the digital service providers, the access points, These are providing all the software and the necessary tools for businesses to actually trade on the network. Intermediaries are things like our bookkeepers and tax agents and advisors, and these are the trusted advisors to business, and they're the ones that often are making the business decision to embark upon e-invoicing. It's important that they are armed with the right information and are strong advocates for e-invoicing in your country. Now, lastly, in the public sector and private sector, public firstly in federal government and state and local, we have 3 tiers in Australia. We had a mandate for our federal or government sector, which we completed last year. We're now busily onboarding our suppliers to actually optimise the benefits for us, but also give back to the small businesses who are our suppliers by paying them in 5 days. We think that's a strong incentive for them to now onboard and when supplying their goods to government, but also what it sends to the rest of the community is that e-invoicing is very efficient and enables you as a business to actually pay in 5 days and not pay in 30+ days as we often see in different communities. So that's why the government is demonstrating that to largely to the large enterprises in our country. Now let's focus on some of the learnings that we've seen so far. What we've learned in the government sector, which is replicated, I suppose, in both in the medium, large enterprises, but you can also apply in the small business, is about change management. You're moving from what largely has been a paper dynamic to this time, and we want to now use the digital tools or the software that people have got. And it is necessary to actually check that your processes in your business are adjusted to reflect that and the efficiency that it provides to you. So it's no use putting the technology in place if you don't make the change and don't harvest or optimize the benefits that it gives to you. And that's a strong learning from our government sector. The next one I'll talk about is in the large sector, in the private sector. Firstly, they have to date had a lot of efficiency through EDI and through scanning. So what we see is their ROI is not always as high as what we seeing with small business on a ratio basis. And so they're looking at other parts of their business that might not have EDI support or scanning support and using e-invoicing to actually make that other part of their business more efficient. So it's not just about the accounts payable, also the accounts receivable. And what we've found already is those large entities, particularly utilities who have got strong accounts receivable, of course, service business or goods business, they're actually seeing the true benefits of e-invoicing for them. But that also then flows on to our small business sector. And the learning there is it's a very powerful awareness tool for us, because when they're receiving their subscription notices or their rates notice or their water bill, it's coming to most businesses have all these type of costs, and they're seeing how easy and simple it is to interact with the bills in their software, so they then are wanting to use that same software to actually send to their own trading partners. No surprise, though, those large businesses have longer lead times, and so that's something we just need to build into the timeframes. Now, in the SME or the micro sector, some of the learnings for us to date, firstly, is about awareness. We probably underestimated how much or how hard it is to actually have the awareness out in the community. So whilst we have been leveraging the trusted advisors and our bookkeepers, the intermediaries and the like, it is still need to have broad awareness campaigns running to actually lift the level of, and particularly during COVID, it was difficult. They were very much focused upon surviving and being resilient, as opposed to looking for something new to read about, albeit there was part of our community who looked for innovation in that period and have grabbed onto e-invoicing as one of those items. So that's about awareness. Confusion as well. I mentioned earlier that people still are having a perceived misunderstanding about what e-invoicing actually is, and we have to get better at that explanation to convince them otherwise. And using tailored case studies and things like that are ways that we've uncovered that helps with that. And I think Songhua is going to give us a couple very shortly. The other area we focus upon is trying to dispel myths and make it real for people. So examples of those are the costs. Now, I know Lim showed before that high costs of implementation are a barrier, and it is a barrier, except where you don't have that high cost. We're very fortunate in Australia when our large accounting packages, which have got e-invoicing solutions embedded in them, they were included in the existing monthly subscription that the business pays. What this means effectively, they got e-invoicing for free. So this is a really strong indicator, sorry, not indicator, it's a strong benefit for business. And not only can they start invoicing, it's going to cost them little or even free in some instances. Likewise, we've got a lot of free portals. If people want to trial using e-invoicing in the first instance, sending those invoices, there's some free portals, only limited numbers of invoices, but nonetheless, they can actually experience it firsthand. So that's a big barrier for us, making it easy. So again, working with these software applications and also software packages, ensuring that the experience is a positive one, and that the tool that the providers gives them all the necessary reporting and information they need to make good business decisions. So there's just some of the significant benefits we're seeing to date. The other barrier we've had is about adversity to change. People are humans, of course, and without having a catalyst for the change, quite often they're very happy doing the same as what they've done before. So you can just go to the next, last couple of slides, please. Conscious of time. As Songhua mentioned earlier in the introduction, is about regional promotions. Both us, Singapore, and also New Zealand and Japan now joining. We're very happy to support our region and helping in any way we can. We also do that through investing in signing agreements or having MOUs with different countries so that we can actually be joined up as a community in this part of the world. And the last slide I'm just going to touch on is just some of the work we're doing now to go on past that foundation stage. And this is about now proving out the network and the success of the network. We're doing things like running what we call a regional hub. What this is about is trying to scale a particular sector or an area in Australia, and we've selected an area in the Hunter Valley, which is a bit north of Sydney, if you know Australia at all. There's about 50,000 businesses in that hub, and we're working hard with the local councils, state government, federal government, and also the businesses in that region to see if we can scale up to what we call critical mass, so that they'll organically will start trading with each other. Large senders is another great initiative. I would recommend that you look for those utilities and large billers to actually get those invoices out in the community. And lastly is having, I think, Lim, you mentioned this about having industries where you're proving it in a particular industry. What we've selected here in Australia is the recruitment industry because of the large reliance upon that for our government sector. And then the other major industry is construction because of the sheer size of it. And we're trying to look at how invoicing can be embedded in the everyday case of invoicing. So I might stop there. I've gone a little bit over time. Apologies for that. I'm going to pass across to Songhua now, unless there was any questions in between.
No, thank you very much, Mark. We're going to move to first names. I'm going to call you Mark. My name is May Ann, and we're going to call Songhua. Yeah, thank you. We have to standardize the way we call each other, right?
Yes,
we're talking about standards. I really like the idea of the adoption journey. I would really like to spend some time on that when we have Q&A. And this is also a please for the audience and participants in this discussion. I really would like to hear the stories of the adoption journey. If you have started on the adoption journey and stopped for some reason, or you can't start and for some reason or other, I think Mark, myself, Songhua, we would actually really like to hear that, because I think we're trying to make sure that we indeed get the benefits and the network effects of everybody being on the same system, but we're sort of kind of stuck between people who are accelerating it, especially like Mark, you mentioned that COVID-19 did have people sort of stop, but we did have leapfroggers who started businesses during COVID-19, and then they basically started with e-invoicing right from the get-go. That was easy for them to onboard, but there are legacy challenges, and the adversity to change is always a bit of a challenge. So if you are in the audience and you have started on that adoption journey but have stopped or have gotten stuck because of some reason or other, please just let me know, and we can discuss it, because we would really like to hear that story. So thank you very much, Mark. I'm going to pass the time really quickly to Seungwoo right now to share a little bit about that, and I think that we're going to get a bit more technical details from you, I think, Seungwoo. Over to you.
Okay, thank you, Lynn. Yeah. Yes, have a slide, please. Let's wait for my slide up. Yeah. Well, again, welcome everybody. Actually, before this session, Mark and I had a discussion to try to deconflict some of the content. So you not see some of the things that Mark covered in his slide on my end, but both countries are about in the same process and journey, and while it's not covered here, some of the things that Mark have covered there is also relevant to Singapore. For example, the different kind of stakeholders involved, and also how we work with the industry. So I'm going to share something here, as well as some of the things that we see that can benefit us and way forward, next roadmap for where we are heading down the road. So for Singapore, just like Australia, we also adopted the same PEPL standard, but you'll find that some of the things that we shared about challenges that we face with SMEs, large enterprises, can be common even if it's not the same standard that we have, because this is really about transformation management, change behaviors, and trying to move the whole ecosystem. They will be transferable in terms of experience and knowledge across, and we are also on our end will be quite happy to hear experiences from those who are using other form of standard as well, because we can also potentially learn from that. So with that, let me just proceed. I will going to cover our journey in one chart. The next slide, please. What you see here is the timeline that how Singapore has gone through this journey. We started actually in 2018 when we identified that e-invoicing at the national level is important for Singapore. So we have announced the adoption of PEPL after looking at the various options in the world, and adopted PEPL as a standard. And so happened that at that time, PEPL was a standard that is common in Europe, and it is born out of Europe. So we were one of the bold ones who adopted the standard outside of Europe. Yeah, so we are quite happy that after we adopted that, we have another two bold countries, Australia and New Zealand, also adopted the same standard. And after that, some years later, we have Japan. So since 2019, after we have launched that in the country, we've been driving adoption, of course, and very similar to Mark, Australia. We have been promoting e-invoicing purely for business to business benefit. So business efficiency is the main driver for us. Yeah, but at the same time, we also recognize it's important for government also to show the way. So our public procurement side also got into the picture and got connected to the network a year later in 2020. And since then, we have been also promoting quite a bit of government suppliers joining the network and also transacting. So fast forward till early this year, we have made an announcement that we have the intention to make invoicing over PEPL to be a default, and we are working on the deadline for that in the coming years. So during COVID, during the period, of course, just like what Australia has experienced, we also saw opportunity to grow the adoption. And around the same period, we have renamed PayPal e-invoicing to a household name Invoice Now. So if you hear the word Invoice Now, it is actually the same as PayPal e-invoicing. And this is the reason for doing so is that we really needed to find a way to connect to the business community. And one of those very successful initiatives that we had was e-payment, and we had a brand name called Pay Now. So everybody knows about Pay Now. So we took the opportunity to call our PayPal invoicing Invoice Now. And both of these digitalization process is similar in a way, because for payment, you are able to pay to the other party simply by sending to the business registration number. So in Singapore, we call it UEN. So for e-invoicing, we did the same because we also use the same unique identifier for business that everybody knows, and you can simply send an invoice based on a UEN. So both Pay Now and Invoice Now is UEN based. So that makes things easier to understand and definitely help us in our adoption drive. So in the same chart here, I showed the various countries coming on board, and Singapore, as usual, when we are situated in a very strategic location, having good interaction with the various countries around us. So right from 2019, we have been working together with Australia and New Zealand in regular meetings and collaborate to learn best practices from each other. And when Japan came on board, they too have joined our regional discussions to help each other in this journey. And for us, like I mentioned earlier in the call, that a number of you already attended some of the sessions that we organized. Since 2019, we've been having annual event, whether it's physical or virtual. We have been having an annual event inviting our ASEAN members to join to get updates. So so that has been going on over some time. On the same chart here, you can see something interesting on the top right-hand corner called PIN implementation. So this is a special initiative that will enhance further cross-border transaction capability, which I will cover at a later slide. So I'll come back to this later on. So moving to the next slide, please. Right, so a bit of a description on where we are in building our ecosystem in the country. We see that the e-invoicing as a nationwide initiative is relevant to all active businesses in the country. So as of today, our estimate of our active businesses range between 200 to 250,000. Not a very big country, obviously, but still a daunting task to try to get all these businesses to be connected and transact. Today, we have 55,000 businesses on the network. But across the whole business community, we see this to be divided into three clear categories. You can see here, A will be those micro SMEs and SMEs who will do fine just by having a very simple solution that will help them do invoicing. They do not necessarily need a complete accounting solution, but they need something very simple. So we have that in the country. We have free solutions or very low-cost solutions available for them. The second category will be quite a sizable group of people, in probably half the population of the businesses here, will benefit from having a proper accounting solution or ERP solution, and not owned by them, but maybe subscribed by from a solution provider. So we do have a lot of these businesses in Singapore, and it is important that we ensure that all these solutions that are out there have the technical ability to connect to the network, which we have done so. Almost all of them who are active in Singapore already connected to the network through some of our programs earlier. So which will simply mean that if the businesses are using or subscribe to this solution for the accounting capability, they can simply turn on the connection to the network and start transacting. So that is one of the important things we have done to try to develop the ecosystem capability. The third one, which is item C here, which is the most difficult task, which is actually connecting enterprise solutions. Not a lot, usually is less than 2-3% of all the businesses out there. They have got big enough to have their own solution in their own data center or in a cloud somewhere, where they have to make a decision to connect and maybe even invest in some form of solution integration to get connected to the network. And so, of course, to them, there's also, of course, obvious benefits to them because the volumes are high. They can also benefit from cost savings and all the good things that come to e-invoicing there. But to get them connected, it will take a long journey. So it's something that we are currently focusing a lot in Singapore, and I'll share a little bit more in the next slide. So can I move on to the next slide? Something wrong with the PowerPoint? Yeah. Do I have the next slide? I can't see the slide. Is there a problem with the connection? Oops. I think that
there is a challenge with the connection. Thanks, Eric, for also mentioning that you can't see it. Kevin, are we? Thank you. Thank you, Lynn.
Okay.
All right, I lost connection. I dropped out of the meeting, sorry. There we go. Is it back up?
Yes, thank you.
Yep. Next slide, please.
Sorry about that.
That was just to make sure that we knew who was paying attention and who wasn't.
Thank you. Can I have the next slide? Yes. So I'm going to show you a couple of pictures here of things that have been happening in Singapore. So what you see here are some of the activities that we have in engaging the industry, the businesses. So we do a lot of events to educate, create awareness, and also use it to drive adoption. Yeah, one of those important things we recently have started doing is what we call enterprise cleaning. We have a full day workshop. In fact, it is happening exactly right now in another location in Singapore, where we have about 10 to 15 companies comes in for a technical training, where we equip them with all the necessary knowledge to be able to launch a project to connect their own solution to the network. This is the way we help with larger companies to get started, and of course then it will follow through by the solution or service providers that they engage to take them through the journey to get connected. So we have different approaches for SME and different approaches for large enterprises. So next slide. Next slide, please. Oops. Okay. Slide 5. Next slide, please. Yeah. Okay. Just bear with us. I don't have a lot of slides to cover, but let me just move on from here. So this slide talks about some of the enterprises who have come on board, the early adopters who already started promoting as well. And it's important in a journey where we have early adopters, significant parties. For example, here in the first picture, we have a sizable supermarket chain, and the CEO himself, the one wearing a red t-shirt, is out there promoting to the suppliers to join the network and drive the benefit message to them himself directly. So we are very happy to see some of the enterprises who gone beyond just joining, but as well as working alongside us to advocate for this cause. So the next slide. Besides the large enterprises, we also see SMEs that came on board also lend their voice to the market to share why they adopted it and why they don't wait but come in. Some of them already see some of the benefits, convenient for them to use invoicing, in this case over PayPal, being able to push invoices out from a single solution that they have, instead of going to different portals to actually provide the information. Of course, having said this, we have of course the difficult SMEs who give us all kinds of reasons for not joining, and some of those reasons could be that they prefer to wait for more to be on board, and then some of them do not see the benefit. Some of them have the perception that the cost is very high. So all kinds of different reasons. We can of course discuss that later at the panel. The next slide, we have another SME who also help to support this, and they have came on board. This particular one was interesting that we realized this particular company came on board because they on their own picked up some of our marketing collateral from our website and discover on their own without us actually reaching them. So in a way, it does show the kind of different dynamics on how different parties picked up this initiative, and either we nudged them to come in, or they found that this is important to them, they themselves come in. So we have all kinds of stories we try to curate to inform the public. So next slide. Earlier we mentioned that we have been active in Singapore to try to pull things together in this region, and what you see here is an important event that we have at the year end called the Exchange Summit. So some of you actually attended this event before. You know that it is one of those very interesting events. We have 20-30 countries that come together worldwide, and experts from overseas are here discussing, deliberating in person about a whole journey about invoicing and new development here. So this is a little thing that we can do to help the countries around us. So as we recognize, while we drive domestic adoption, which is very important for us, we can't ignore the need for us to be able to drive also cross-border seamless transactions as well. So we need a way for our other countries around us to come alongside the journey one way or the other, so that we can have some form of interoperability within amongst us. So, and that leads to the next slide, I think. Before I talk about PIN, I just wanted to also share that I think earlier Lynn highlighted some of the information about ASEAN. Last year we did this study, and this is a double click down from what you saw earlier. You can pick this information from our website, that you can see that because of the involvement in ASEAN, we did a study last year to see where the various countries are. So good news is that most of the countries are looking forward to move to the next step, and some have gone ahead and putting a lot of effort on the ground to really drive adoption in the modern solution. Some are looking at the options that they have. But definitely it is one topic that interests all the countries around us. So let's move to the next slide. One of those things that is up and coming is shown in this invoicing model that was published from Europe, from a group called an expert group, that looked at the various implementation of e-invoicing. And it's very complex here, but a lot of this is focused on tax administration. On the leftmost side, you see in item A, it is just a model that shows the interoperability model that is adopted by those on PEPL, like Australia, New Zealand, Singapore, and Japan. And from B, C, and D, these are typical models adopted by a lot of countries even in ASEAN that attempt to do it for various reasons. A number of these are actually because of tax administration reason. Yeah, and on the rightmost side in Model E, where the expert group is predicting in the future how things will converge. You can see the need from the green color and the blue color converge together in a model that the unified model of implementation of invoicing that serves all needs in a way, so that you can businesses can see the potential of having an investment on invoicing that serves multiple needs, and in order to reap the full benefit of this, the government do have a role to play to make decisions on standards, make decisions on how they can drive the ecosystem so that they can meet multiple needs at the same time. So while we are all in our own little corner trying to drive adoption, make changes, there are also a larger picture of how the world is morphing towards. So I think in the next couple of years, you'll see a lot more discussion in the Model E that is now becoming quite popular, and some countries in Europe are already considering this. So I think I have one last slide before we go into the discussion. So let's move on to the next one. This slide I highlighted earlier about this thing called PIN. PIN stands for PEPL International E-invoicing. When we adopted PEPL as a standard, we see the big promise of having to have a unified standard that makes cross-border transaction easy, because after all, it's on the same network, it's the same format. So yes, right now we can send e-invoices across from Australia to New Zealand and to other places in the world, but we also realize that improvements can be made. And since 2019, in the PEPL community, we have been developing an advanced standard called PIN that will make it even more seamless for us to be able to transact cross-border. So the countries around in this region who have adopted PEPL are now looking at implementing this new format and new network capability on top of PEPL to be able to really take advantage of cross-border transaction. So this is coming in very timely, because while we are all driving our local domestic transaction, we are really looking forward to see how cross-border transaction can happen on top of this standard that we are all implementing. So together with Australia, New Zealand, and Japan here, and soon hopefully other countries, we will be trying to harmonize our migration to these standards so that we can see more and more cross-border transaction happening. So I think with that, I would like to end here. I think just hopefully what was shared will give you a glimpse of what's happening in Singapore and particularly on the PEPL standard where we are heading. All right, back to you, Lee.
Thanks, Yonghwa. Thank you very much for that overview. Mark, I'm going to get you to join us once again as we enter into the panel discussion session. So there's been a lot of information actually just thrown at us, and I can actually see that it's actually quite core for us to understand the different stakeholders that are involved in the entire ecosystem, because we are very much focused on MSMEs, but a lot of some of that discussion. So for example, Yonghwa, you mentioned the PINT, the point testing, which I believe should be on the government and the standards sort of technical community perspective. And then we also obviously see the change management that's required, which Mark covered quite a lot of, and that is engaging with the MSMEs themselves, and then focus very much on another really big community, which are the enablers. So the e-invoicing companies, I would actually also include the banks in this. And Dr. John Yor, who is in the audience, also asked a question around, does the Pebble invoicing standard system also connect to customs for paperless trading? Is there a strategy for this? So we can actually see that there are quite a number of sort of things that you want to be interconnecting, and I'm going to pose John's question to both Mark and Seonghwa in the first instance, because I do want to recognize that we do have a question about how does the interconnection therefore also include customs and other, I guess, stakeholders for paperless trading. Is there a strategy for this?
Yeah, maybe I go first, and Mark, you can always jump in. I think in all cases of digitalization, so if you start building things that put things into a digital form, there's a lot of potential you can build on top of that. So for current state of affairs for Pebble e-invoicing is really trying to solve a problem how we can actually connect two systems together. My system of generating an invoice versus my customer system can be all kinds of different shape or form, so that we can then ensure a structured data gets transmitted from one end to the other end without having to have human intervention in between. So it's a very simple, very pure sense of just digital transmission. It's the EDI of the future. So we are focused in trying to get this thing done and as broad as possible. And when that is done, the data based on structured format can be used to funnel to different repository, different kind of networks or different kind of purposes to use it for different purpose. So specific to the question on custom clearance and all the documentation there, like what was mentioned, 50 pages of all these documents it is a very wicked problem to solve there. Invoice is just one item inside there, but in a way right now we are not attempting to solve the custom problem. We are just trying to solve a problem between a buyer and a supplier to try to connect to each other. So I personally see that down the road, there's once we have this data there, we can always flow the data to custom or some party who need to use it. But to solve the problem, to try to digitize all the documents required for shipment is really another set of problem. Yeah, and this last thing to say is that while we are not solving that large complex problem, it doesn't stop us from solving this problem we are doing. Because it has its own benefits. So maybe Mark, if there's anything you can like to add.
Yeah, look, I agree that at the moment we don't have the capacity to look at this unique problem here that's being put to us. But what I can say is the benefit of being part of a global community as you join Pebble, though, is that different parts of that community are focused on different areas. And what I can say is I know in the Nordics, they're actually doing a project on ports and shipping. So we'll be able to actually harness the learnings from that and actually bring that to the relevant countries where we need that to help with digital trade around ports and shipping. So they're just undertaking that at the moment. So that's the benefit of being part of this broader community.
Yeah, I think there's also for us in Singapore, in IMDA, we have another initiative called Trade Trust that looks at document attestation. So that is also something we are working quite heavily in a different stream, my other colleagues doing it. But it currently looks like there are two different separate initiatives, and it's solving its own problem in a way. But in the future, fully foresee some of these will converge together and support each other.
Sorry, I was not expecting you to finish so fast. I was putting in the Trade Trust link in the chat for everybody who wanted to look at it, because I am also following Trade Trust, which I quite enjoy. Yet another one of those not quite sexy things, but really important for us. John, I hope that answers your question. I do take Seonghwa and Mark's point that, yes, of all of the 50 documents that will be required for consignments, invoicing is one of them. And I like Seonghwa's point that says we're not trying to boil the ocean and trying to solve, world hunger and achieve world peace here, but we're really trying to focus really on the purchasing journey that a buyer and a supplier will have between them. I'm going to again open up to see if anyone has any questions to either Seonghwa, to Mark, or even to myself around e-invoicing and what we've discussed today around making sure that we do have a good ecosystem and the different parts and components. Thanks, John. Anyone else have any questions before I perhaps move on to some questions which are going to be a lot of from my own personal curiosity and from a really practical perspective? Going once, going twice. Well, all right. If you have questions, please do drop them in. I'm gonna. Oh, okay. Leslie has a question. Is the PEPL system easily integrated into existing systems? Super good question.
Mark, you want to go first?
Yeah, I can jump in.
What is easily?
Yeah. Well, that's exactly right, man. Is it what is easy? Because we've got a variety. The beauty of PEPL, it does integrate into all levels. So right from a very small app, which might have inventory control or management of invoices through an app, right through to large ERPs like SAP, Oracle, Technology One, etc. PEPL can be integrated into them all. What we say here in Australia, though, is it's a complementary to the existing channels that they have. So over time, we would expect to see the efficiency and the cost benefit of PEPL overriding some of these older technologies. But in the interim, we can just see how, if I'm talking about a large enterprise here, they will have a very large investment in their current EDI solution. So we're not telling them they must do away with those millions of dollars, but they will open up an additional channel that allows the small business software package to interact with their ERP on a seamless basis and get the efficiencies at both ends. So that's how I see them integrating. Is it easy? I would think, I've just named 3 big companies that have already got solutions that are PEPL enabled. I would say that covers a large percentage of your large corporates. In the middle, medium sector, there are more and more countries actually building that into their solutions to support their customers. And we have at the smaller end apps and also accounting packages globally that now have e-invoicing embedded. So I think it's pretty well advanced. Still some companies still to invest in PEPL, but I think we're pretty well covered.
Well, just want to add on this, I will try to answer it slightly differently. I think from a technical perspective, if you would like to know, the integration with the network requires 2-3 things. Really is data transformation, meaning that from a proprietary format, mapping into PEPL standard. So there's one step, data transformation and also the transmission. The second thing is really be able to work with the provider to transmit the data. So one thing, while I explained that doing these 2 things is very simple. It's just a connectivity layer that involves data as well as transport. That's all. But the important thing is that a lot of parties get confused because when they think about invoicing, they think about a transformation of the procurement process, which means that they need to adopt a solution that will embed three-way matching and all the kind of things. Yes, those are the things that's needed to improve your processes. But in our case here, when we are talking about e-invoicing, it's really just trying to transmit the information in the network. So if you break it down, PEPL, connecting to PEPL to send is actually quite simple. It is really some of those larger companies, they need to do it, a broader way. They need to look at how they can transform their processes, and that becomes a bit more complicated. But having said that, as we journey further, a lot of the package solution have already built the capability. So it makes it easier and easier as we go down the road. So when I mentioned that big work for us to do is to connect large enterprises with their own solution, every one of them is a system integration effort. So in a way, while the connectivity portion is simple, it's still a project to them. And yeah, so simply put, I mean, the summary is that actually it's not that difficult. Yeah.
Thanks, Younghwa. Thanks, Mark. So it sounds like if I am a company, thanks, Leslie, for acknowledging, and I hope that was useful. It sounds like, Younghwa and Mark, that if I am a company, a small and medium enterprise, and I want to make sure that I adhere to this, it sounds like the easiest way for me to do is simply I make sure that I use a vendor for my ERP system that has already got PEPL, is already PEPL accredited. So it literally then becomes an invisible standard because I can be reassured that since I am on a branded system that has the accreditation, I don't actually need to do it. But what happens then, and this is actually very related to Leslie's question, what happens if I am an existing, like I'll be a medium enterprise, so not a tiny enterprise with 5 people, but a medium enterprise of like 20 people, and we've got, I don't know, capital revenue of, I don't know, a couple of $1 million a year, and it's in and out, and I've got my own system, and because mine's a family business, I've actually got a legacy system of doing my invoices. It is digitized, but it's not on any of the modern ERP systems. I'm still using sort of onboarded when, you know, Excel spreadsheets and what have you. I've all got my macros all set up already. How then is the recommendation, therefore, that I indeed do that painful change management where I do shift to a PEPL standard, or should I be looking to find a way to integrate it into my current system?
Yeah, actually, the question whether or not to shift or not to shift really is a question that is up to them in the requirement. I mean, they must have a reason why they have built their own system. For example, they built a .NET Microsoft-based solution, right? And they may be because they have their own internal capability and they are growing a side business on this, and they created their own solution. So whether or not they stick to that or they move on is really, first and foremost, is their business call. Yeah. And after that, if let's say they choose to stick to this solution, which is, you know, totally customized, no prior work done that's related to PEPL, then they go through the process that I described just now. They have to get a provider to help them, which is the access points, but they go through integration work that involves the data transformation as well as connectivity. And it is a work that lasts between 3 months to 9 months. Yeah, so it depends on the complexity. So cost-wise is low tens of $1,000s in terms of effort, but it's not like into 6-figure in US dollar. Yeah, so it is not a very huge investment. But again, depends on the size.
I'd agree. I mean, the cost is what I would say is the cost, and the time is what I'd also say. So another factor I'd say to that business is, what do you use that system for? So you don't only use it for e-invoicing. Do you use it for HR? Do you use it for connecting to other government services or whatever? So you kind of look at your bigger business case, because I see companies who are going into looking at e-invoicing is, well, the solution you might have today has to be greatly enhanced, not only to do invoicing, but you might be holding off doing some other regulatory reporting or something else, that you could be a fully digital business, and therefore it's a catalyst to making that big step and getting the new solution in. So depending, you know, what you want to use that system for.
Cool. I would again invite the audience to be asking questions if you do have them. I would again look towards some, again, my own curiosity and how we do it. One of the things which I've noticed certain companies doing is it's a little bit insidious. Instead of accepting your invoice, they take your invoice and they consider your invoice a little bit of a quotation, and they force you to use their system to put in that invoice, and that basically becomes a Pebble standardized invoice because you have to fill in all the forms, etc. And that's one of the approaches towards I guess onboarding or forcing people to onboard by making sure that they adhere to that particular system. Are there any other stories or pain points that you've heard or listened to or can tell us a little bit when encountering in Singapore or in Australia where companies such as MSMEs have been transitioning to e-invoicing?
I'm thinking of success factors, but I'll let someone start while I'm thinking about that.
Yeah. Okay, I have something to add. I think SMEs benefit. We know that SMEs are typically mostly are suppliers. Yeah, SMEs are suppliers. Some of them are buyers. So from a supplier perspective, the benefit, of course, is not having to hop to all the different buyer system to enter the portal information, and having to understand how to do it properly in different customers' requirements. So, but we in Singapore, we are beginning to see even more advanced benefits. For example, we are now pushing for the buyers to be able to send order to the suppliers. So being able to send orders to the suppliers will mean that it will benefit the buyer if the supplier is able to use the same information to save their data entry time, flip it into an invoice, and send back to the buyer, who then can depend on the good data that they initiated in the first place to do a straight-through processing and pay the supplier faster. So this whole round-trip thing is beginning to see happening that create a lot more benefit to the supplier. So this is the future. More and more of this digitization happen, we will then be able to go more upstream in the process and get more things done.
Yeah, I'd agree somewhat with that in terms of having to ingest the more and more information is going to make one, you've got that data at your fingertips to make better business decisions, but it also enables you to be more productive. Because example, I can recall back talking to a bookkeeper where we've done a demonstration of they were the recipient of the invoice, and when they saw it come ingested into their accounting package, they were expecting it to have either just a summary level invoice, meaning total goods of X amount with GST or VAT of X amount of dollars. But when it had all the line item detail already pre-populated into their system, it was a really light bulb moment in terms of, wow, all this comes for free. Because in the past, I used to then get the PDF and I'd manually put all that PDF information into the accounting system and code that to the different account. Whereas now my package ingests all the line item and also it codes it to my ledger by per line item. And so it takes away a lot of effort. And this is where the productivity benefit for businesses really starts to be demonstrated.
I see a question on the Industry and Trade Association. Yeah, I mean, Singapore Business Federation, for example, they are a partner. Singapore Manufacturing Federation is with us as well. So they are definitely seeing this as a future for their members, and they have in Singapore, both of these parties have taken the step forward. In fact, just more than we also have SCCI. A number of them, they actually adopted it and they are promoting their businesses, and some of them are using that as a channel to go and charge the business membership through the same channel. So they are actually driving transactions also. So definitely they are very excited about this and they've been helping us to promote.
Sounds good. Thank you very much, Seungwon, for that. I hope, John, I think that is quite an affirmation for the role in industry associations. At least in Singapore, I think that there's been quite a lot of cooperation in that sense. I think a lot of people do see that there is benefit to the network effects. That's sort of all the time that we have for today. We've got 1 more minute, and let me just wrap everything up. I think that for e-invoicing, we can definitely see that there are a lot of benefits to it. I believe Seonghwa and Mark, you will both agree with me that we are on our way to developing a good system, and this is a foundational system that is going to bedrock a lot more development and interconnectivity and interoperability in the future. We're not quite there yet in terms of adoption. I don't think that we have got the economies of scale and scope to really say everybody that's get on this boat together. But given the fact that we are seeing a lot more work that's also being done on other platforms such as Trade Trust, which we didn't manage to get to it, but that idea of the decentralized authentication systems is going to be really powerful in the future because of the need for authenticity and authentication, as well as trust systems. I think that that's definitely going to go a long way in the future. We're not quite there yet, so I really thank you very much, everybody, Seonghwa and to Mark, as well as to all the participants in this discussion. I see that there are going to be, Lee Sing has just dropped in the survey. We will be sending out more information following the session. I'm going to get Seonghwa and Mark to smile into your camera so that I can take a couple of screenshots for us. Thank you very much for the session, and I would like to say very good afternoon or good evening to all of you.